Why are news editors using passive language when covering war crimes in Gaza? Let's begin with two headlines. A Ukrainian journalist has died after heavy shelling in Mariupol. 150 Syrians killed in Aleppo following airstrikes on residential buildings. What is missing from these headlines? Well, quite a lot. Mostly the why and the who, as in who is responsible. These headlines aren't real, by the way. You wouldn't find these headlines in most Western news outlets. They tend to provide the who and at least some of the why. For example, Ukrainian journalist killed by Russian snipers in ambush near Kherson. New reports detail Assad's brutal tactics in Syria. But when it comes to death and destruction in Gaza, Western news outlets often use what is known as the passive voice. But instead of me giving you a definition, let's start with an example. The New York Times used the passive voice in its coverage of Israel's killing of a Palestinian cameraman. It said, an Al Jazeera cameraman was killed on Friday during an attack in southern Gaza. The article uses the passive was killed, as there is no mention that Israel was responsible, despite many sources confirming that the journalists were hit by an Israeli drone attack on Gaza school. A grammar textbook will tell you that one of the reasons you might use the passive voice in a sentence is when we prefer not to mention who or what does the action. Maybe the editors thought that the headline was too long and they couldn't fit in the extra information. But let's compare this with their coverage of the 3 Israeli hostages that were killed by friendly fire. The killing of the 3 hostages in Gaza by Israeli soldiers. The army admitted to shooting 3 Israeli hostages as they held up a white flag in Gaza. In this case, shooting is used as an active verb and blame is actively apportioned to Israeli soldiers. So it is possible. This follows a pattern in dozens of articles following the 7 October attack. Israelis were actively killed, usually by Hamas. Intention and blame were apportioned, while Palestinians passively died of a seemingly unknown cause. Let's take a quick look at the BBC, the most visited news site in the world. Their anchors' introductions also use the passive voice when it comes to Palestinian deaths. There is often no mention of who is responsible, even in the text headlines.
In Gaza, Hamas officials say at least 700 people have been killed in the last 24 hours. It means, according to those officials, that the total number killed in this war is now more than 5,700, including more than 2,300 children. Our special correspondent...
More than 1,400 people have been killed since Saturday in retaliatory attacks in the territory. And the Red Cross says if backup generators fail, hospitals risk becoming morgues. And there are reports tonight in the last few minutes of heavy shelling in areas of Gaza thought to have been safe for families. John Donison has more.
Have a listen to this editor from BBC Digital who said that they have to ensure all the facts are checked before they can assign blame.
A simple headline or a strap on the news channel can be lifted out of context and then amplified via social media by people that have strong opinions about this conflict. And that means that even in kind of the short headline, we need to make it absolutely crystal clear whether this is facts or whether it's coming from a source.
Is that really true? Let's see how they cover Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
We begin in Ukraine, where the Interior Affairs Minister says a missile attack on a village in the northeast of the Kharkiv region has killed at least 51 people, including a 6-year-old boy. President Zelensky has called it an act of Russian terror. In
this clip, the active verb kills is used, and blame is very clearly apportioned to Russia in the headline and by the anchor.
More now on the news that dozens of people have been injured after Russia launched a wave of missile strikes at the Ukrainian capital overnight.
Again, the aggressor is immediately and clearly named as Russia. This shouldn't be controversial. We know exactly who is responsible because one side is invading and assaulting the other. So why is it so difficult in coverage of Gaza?
This is as close as we can get to Gaza itself, about 5 kilometers in that direction.
So accuracy and language are important. And it's hard to believe that the highly experienced news editors of the most prestigious outlets, many of whom went to top universities and were educated at elite schools, don't know what they're doing here. For all their claim of impartiality, there is an implicit bias in Western media, especially those in the UK and the US. When it comes to Israel, there is an aversion to direct criticism and a clear bias, the purpose of which is to provide diplomatic and media cover for an ally committing genocide.